Good morning. It's 10 a.m. Pacific time, so we're going to get started. We always like to start right on time with these webinars. Welcome. I'm Brandon Laws. I'll be your moderator for today, and we have Lacey Partipilo here as well. Do a quick little intro, and then we'll get right into the content. We've got 60 minutes to cover a lot of areas, so we're excited about this one. This webinar is called "How to Stop Letting Broken Processes Ruin the Employee Experience," and in all of our time in supporting the small and medium-sized organizations over the decades, we've seen how so many manual and broken processes can really create a lot of friction inside of organizations. And over the probably the last decade, some of this tech is really getting so advanced where it can solve a lot of these problems. And we've seen it firsthand as we've helped small and medium-sized organizations solve some of these problems. So we're going to cover 9 different areas today, and you're going to get a lot of content from Lacey. So let's get after it. I'm Brandon Laws. I'm Vice President of Marketing and Product at Xenium. I've been with the organization almost 17 years. In October, it'll be 17 years. And so if you've been at one of the webinars or listened to our podcast, you've probably heard my voice or seen me before. And I'm glad to be here. I'll be moderating for Lacey. Lacey, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. My name is Lacey Partipilo, and I'm the Vice President of Client Success here at Xenium. I will, in a couple of months, be celebrating 19 years with Xenium and the Stoller Group. So I do beat you. Got a little bit of a head start on the Express side of things. So really happy to be here. I came by this job through the HR track. So some of you know me from doing HR work for many, many years, and now get the opportunity to do stuff like this, interact with clients. I feel really passionately about making it a positive employee experience, and that translates into so many good things for organizations. So excited to talk about some of the tips and tricks that we've got.
I'm so grateful you're here. I'm excited to get into the content. But first, let's cover some housekeeping items. This is a 60-minute webinar. We're going to try to rush through as much as we can while also providing a lot of the valuable content that we've provided today. In that 60 minutes, we'll cover the content, but feel free to ask questions throughout. I'll be monitoring the Q&A module and the chat. You can use either or. Usually, if you have a question, use the Q&A portion, but I'll be watching both, so feel free to use either of those. We'll try to set aside time at the end for Q&A, like a formal Q&A as well, if you want to wait until the very end, but feel free to ask questions throughout. This session is recorded. It is recording, and it will be available after. So following this session, likely tomorrow morning, I will send out the recording and the slides. Those will be available on demand forever. And you can share that with anybody that you'd like. So let's do a quick little overview and then get into it. What we're going to cover today is common employee experience challenges that we experience inside organizations, and then provide a solution for that enhance the employee experience. So we'll cover 9 different areas, and then we'll set aside time for Q&A. So let's cover our first challenge: poor hiring experience.
Yeah. Hiring's so fun. Super time consuming process. We know that. And we know that the hiring process is generally the employees, the future employees, the candidates' first experience to your organization. And so if the process is clunky, if it's time consuming, if you're using paper, I think employees are just feeling a certain way about your organization. And we want your brand to be standout, and employees to feel really positive about interacting with you through that process. So there are some compliance challenges too, depending on, if you've got federal contracts. Tracking requirements are really important. And we know that, time to fill is money. Empty seats in your organization is costly. And so if we don't have a good, solid hiring experience, it impacts the organization really across the board. So when I think about how we solve for this, I think there's some opportunities to invest in technology. And actually, it's not a super expensive add-on type of technology generally in payroll platforms. Having an applicant tracking system or an ATS, some type of module that employees can go through, an electronic application does a whole lot of good for the organization. So I think about just everything we do right now, mobile, on our phones, online. Most people are doing that electronically, right? So we fill out a form. I was just filling out ordering school pictures for my kiddos. It's all online. Like, they're not bringing home the paper packets anymore. So I think kind of mirroring that in terms of your employee experience matters. There's also some really advanced technology that is embedded inside of ATS systems now. So you can do pre-screening questions. So you can kind of weed out candidates that maybe don't meet the minimum qualifications of the role. Sometimes some of those tools even have AI. So they're able to kind of make suggestions for which candidates for you to screen. You have to be careful about that. There's some regulatory things in different states that could impact your ability to use tech like that. But it's really helpful to just be able to have everything kind of in one place, be able to sort, be able to communicate with hiring managers. So if you're a hiring manager and you're getting like resumes forwarded by email, we get a million emails as it is, you're trying to sort through that, being able to log into a platform and see who's there, rank those candidates, even keeping track of where they are inside of the hiring process, whether you phone screened, interviewed, we're doing references, we're moving forward, all of that managed inside of one platform just makes a big difference. And we know when you use an ATS, the quality of candidates that comes through is higher. The volume of qualified candidates is higher. And generally, in most cases, you can post directly to the job boards that matter for your positions. There's costs sometimes associated with that, similarly to how, if you go directly to Indeed and post. So you're not necessarily mitigating that, but just being able to do it sort of one way, clicking through the job ads that you're interested in makes a big difference. So less time for you, better experience for the candidates, and that's what we want to see.
This is one of those technologies too, where I think it really enhances the employer brand as well, because you have a lot of candidates interacting with this technology. It's no different than like on the marketing side. If somebody's interacting with your website, you give them a good experience, it could enhance your employee brand from the experience and leave them with a good experience. Okay, solution or challenge number 2, we're going right along with the employee life cycle, a poor onboarding experience.
Yeah. Many of you have maybe even experienced this. You're joining with an organization and you get there and they don't have all of the paperwork ready for you. Somebody isn't, there to kind of walk you through all of that. And onboarding is so important. We don't live in an in-office world anymore. In most cases, most organizations have some level of remote or hybrid. Many of us are in multiple states. And so managing the complexity of notices and requirements that have to be provided to new hires, depending on the state that the employee is working out of, is challenging. And I believe that if there is friction or just effort that has to happen in the onboarding experience, I think that stays with employees. And we really want them to kind of get off on a good foot and get people onboarded and proficient quickly. Same as time to fill, time to onboard makes a difference for the organization. So there's some things to think about in terms of how to support a better onboarding experience for employees. So if you want to switch there, Brandon, to some of the solutions and ideas that we have, one is just having an electronic onboarding process. It's a really important tool that will not only help employees have a more consistent experience, but we're able to ensure that if we've got people that are in office or working from home, we're able to collect that same information. We can also embed videos and training and kind of that multimedia that we're hearing is so important for someone, an adult learner. I think this is a good way to do that. So onboarding experience, especially through our Prism platform, can be customized. Some things we want to get people to sign off on. Some things we just want to be able to showcase and put in front of an employee and have them watch, like Xenium has our culture video that I think is embedded inside of our onboarding process. So new hires can watch that and kind of get a taste for what's it like to work here. Not only is this process intended to be customized for your organization, but you may have specific roles that have different things that they need to review. I've had clients who've got maybe some safety specific information that needs to be shared with certain employees. I've even had an organization embed a job description that needs a signature inside by role. So even down to department, division, that type of thing, location. If you're in a particular state, California is one where there are new hire forms that need to be provided to employees. So if you've got folks that are not necessarily just working out of Oregon, Washington, and you want to make sure that you're compliant, we can use the onboarding process and that electronic onboarding to do that. And there's some new features. So you may already be doing this, but we do have the ability now to initiate onboarding without asking for a social security number. So that has been a challenge for some clients where it feels a little awkward. You're making an offer and you're like, can I have your social? And so we do have the ability through the manager portal to initiate this process without that social security number, which is a nice feature. So if you're not doing it that way and you're interested, happy to connect with you offline and we can talk about the process change that would require. But having an ATS that connects with an onboarding platform. So again, that seamless experience is important. So we're not having to double enter employees into the system, and we can just hire them from the ATS and they move into onboarding and then they become an active employee in our payroll platform is really important. So I'm a strong believer in this one and have seen it provide a lot of success for clients.
All right, challenge number 3. This is a big one. Managing the open enrollment process. Talk about a friction experience, right?
It is. And many of us are like going into that season right now. A lot of employers have their renewals effective in January. So you're thinking about how are we going to manage our open enrollment process and think about how you've done it in the past. Many employers have increased the number of plans that they're providing because the cost of insurance is just gone up. And so wanting to provide for folks who want maybe a richer plan and can afford a higher premium, that option, and then a few maybe less rich benefit offerings. So we're seeing more plans offered. There are paid leave benefits required in many states now. And so we may have other ancillary benefits too that we need employees to provide a beneficiary form for. And so just the complexity of the workforce has changed the benefit offerings that employers are providing. And so for that reason, and just because communicating is hard with employees in kind of a hybrid environment, I think it's important to really think about how you're planning to manage your open enrollment process for this year and moving forward if the way that you're doing it right now is still using carrier forms. So we can talk a little bit about an online benefits platform that I think really streamlines things. It helps employees be continually directed to your payroll platform, right? We want employees to be able to do some of that self-service. We'll talk about that here a little bit later. Messaging around benefits is important. I think many employers, it's like in the top 3 line items in terms of cost for running your business is providing health insurance and benefits to employees. So you're paying a lot of money for it. Let's make sure that we're really educating employees about that. So a way to organize and showcase all the great things that you're offering to employees, even using a platform. Prism's got the ability to compare plans. So I can see if I elect this plan, what's the cost compared to this one. We're eliminating having to read people's handwriting on those paper forms and having to go into carrier sites and manually enter that in. Not only just for kind of your open enrollment period, but newly eligible employees that come along. It's an important piece of their onboarding process. So I've done my, electronic onboarding, my new hire paperwork, and I'm flowing right into the opportunity to enroll in benefits. So we get all that documentation in a timely manner. We're not having to deal with reconciliation issues where employees enroll too late because we forgot to meet with them. We just get that automation with the eligibility. So it's a really great employee experience. I think it marries really well with using an onboarding experience that also happens through a platform.
I think the best part of a tool like this is it frees up so much time for everybody.
Absolutely. Because you've got somebody on your team that's administering this for you, whether they're collecting those forms. And especially again, I keep saying this hybrid environment, but I'm not walking down to Brandon's office to collect his form, right? And getting those virtually and sent in, being able to read those, it's a lot of effort. And employees, again, are expecting an experience that they can do that's mobile optimized or from their, their work computer.
All right, challenge number 4. This is a big one, especially in this hybrid work environment: fragmented communication and inconsistent communication.
Yeah, I mean, I would say when I think back on like working, more directly even with clients in my HR business partner role and as an HR director, one of the things that comes up a lot for me in terms of employee challenges and where they stem from, it's communication. So we know that employee and employer communication is crucial in terms of, retaining employees, there being trust between leadership and the employee group. And in order to ensure that everybody is getting a consistent message when you've got a hybrid environment, or even if you're all in person, you think about, kind of the telephone game of I've communicated from HR to my directors. They're communicating to the supervisors who communicate to the leads, who communicate to the employees. It's like the telephone game, and it's like lost in translation. Or people forget, or the information is delayed, and all of those things have an impact on how the employee feels about your organization. So we want folks to be communicated to in a timely manner. And when we're using lots of different means to do this, I think that can be just really challenging. So communication is really important for employers to be thinking about, and just different ways to do that. So I love talking about, and Brandon, this is your wheelhouse too, so you definitely feel free to chime in, but just some tech-based communication channels. So obviously using your employee platform that your HRIS or your HRMS that has employee information in it where you can communicate directly. So we did a webinar not too long ago about employee alerts, like getting communication out to employees. So when they log in, they're seeing that message right there. We can make sure that that is happening timely for employees. So that's one easy way to communicate with employees. I think that works really well. I think also making sure that, those communication channels that go out to employees happen in a timely manner. So keeping that in mind is really important. I think there's also tools that you're using that aren't necessarily part of an HRIS platform that can be helpful. So many of our clients use Teams. They might use Slack. There's lots of other options for communication, but what's cool about some of those is that you can have different groups or channels where you've got employees that are similarly positioned in a work group, and being able to communicate directly to that employee versus sending email. So like we're just so bogged down with email, and finding ways to communicate that way, I think, is really important. Sometimes what we want to communicate is information that should live on. So I think about how our team, and Brandon, you were involved in this, implemented the knowledge-based system Guru that we're using right now, and like the transformation that has created for our organization in terms of helping new folks find what they need. We're not digging through, drives and folders and trying to remember where things are saved. And also having that platform be able to notify us when things need to be updated or checked in on. It's searchable. You can ask it questions. I can't say enough good stuff about it. It's transformed the way that I do my work and the way that I communicate things out to our teams about client success related information. So that's definitely made a difference.
When we first started looking into the knowledge management system, the why behind it and the problem we were trying to solve is that people were spending so much time looking for stuff. And oftentimes information resides in somebody's brain, and or like key employees that have the information, and it's not necessarily documented somewhere. But sometimes people think it's documented, so they're looking through drives, they're looking through past emails, meeting notes, whatever it may be, and you tend to spend a lot of time looking for those things. Whereas if you have one central hub of verified information, then people could self-service like the information they're looking for and ask questions. And this is like, I'm in no way affiliated with Guru, the knowledge management platform we chose, but it's AI powered, so you can ask it questions and it'll have a chat back and forth about like whatever you're trying to ask it. Really powerful tool. And the same goes for like project management systems too. This is not something that's necessarily tied to an HRIS system, but selecting a project management tool that people can work on their project and tasks and have everything in order, files attached, a thread for communication. It just keeps everything nicely fit where people can collaborate effectively. And this is a really good way to reduce friction inside your organization. It's really frustrating
Absolutely.
when you can't find what you're looking for, or you don't have the tools to effectively do your job.
Yeah, when we connect with clients about employee challenges, sometimes those challenges are related to some of the softer things that happen in an organization. But a lot of times there's ends up being feedback about, I don't have the tools to do my job. And I could be a lot more effective here for the organization, which is actually what we want. We want employees that are producing at the highest levels. And sometimes that means an investment in tools and an evaluation of those tools. And I actually like the idea of even getting employees involved in that process. The who will be the end user of the product, asking that question, what problem are we trying to solve here? And getting input. And obviously there's always going to be a decision maker, and budget is always, something to consider. But you can tell where employees are kind of creating workarounds and, trying free resources out there. And I think from an equity perspective, just making sure that we've got tools that are, equitable across teams and are producing at a high level for your organization is important. So lots of things to consider around that.
Yeah, and one thing to really consider when it comes to all these communication channels is creating some etiquette and norms for your organization as well. I know when we went fully remote and then mostly hybrid, now we did develop some sort of hybrid playbook for how we communicate, how we use email, how we use Teams. We're a Microsoft-based organization, so we started documenting some of those things. So day one, an employee could start to figure out how to use these tools, proper ways of communicating, the right channels for the right tool or communication methods. So having all that documented is important.
Yeah, I think it helps set people up for success coming into your organization.
Yeah. All right, let's move to challenge number 5, not keeping a pulse on what employees want.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like what's the sentiment of the workforce right now, I think there's a lot going on in communities, in the world, inside your workplace. And so all of that impacts an employee's ability to be effective in their job. And then there's like the personal stressors. So health issues, caring for young kiddos, caring for aging parents, like all of these things add to the pressure. And there are some things that are outside of our control as an employer, and some things that we can definitely, move the needle on. So I, see this challenge as one that affects all employers. I think, if we've got employees who are working for us that their engagement is declining, they're feeling less trust between leadership and themselves, we risk retention issues. And maybe even worse than that is disgruntled or unhappy employees sticking around. So we talk a lot about like, oh, we got to retain people and we don't want to have turnover. I think something that can be just as damaging and, maybe even more is folks that you're not totally sure what they're upset about, or you can tell that there's some upset, and kind of the trickle effect that can have on culture, which affects your employer brand. And ultimately, that's kind of a leading indicator that you're going to have problems down the road in attracting talent and retaining some of those high performers. So when we know what employees need and what it is that would make an impact on them having a more positive employee experience, I think it can just help us get better. And so there's lots of different ways to solicit feedback from employees. I mean, we have our what people want from work survey that we do every year, and I love that. I think that's a great pulse check. There's other types of surveys. So full engagement surveys, right? Where employees are spending a fair amount of time going through questions related to, their work environment, leadership, communication, trust, and you're asking them to provide ratings. That's one way to do it. I also love the idea of incorporating some type of life cycle survey for employees. So that's where we kind of look at what are those milestones for an employee in their life cycle with us as an organization, and when would be the best time to get feedback. That could be at 30 days, it could be 90 days. We could do annual on their anniversary. It's part of their review cycle. Could happen after promotion. We could do skip level surveys when we've got a new manager that's reporting over some employees. So lots of ways to incorporate that. There's also 360 feedback where you can get feedback from individuals that work closely with an employee as part of their just performance management. I also like the idea of having some type of way for employees to provide feedback regardless of being asked. So whether that's some type of electronic form where employees can submit feedback, you've got managers who are really consistent in having one-on-ones, and maybe they ask for feedback in those one-on-ones and report that out. Using channels like that makes a difference. So we're able to detect things early before they become a bigger issue. Generally, things don't get better. That's what I always say. Like, if there's something bubbling, if we can address it early on, I think we can, avoid some things that get sometimes really dicey, and we're dealing with like legal claims and really big issues. I think it also helps just normalize feedback. You don't want to over survey, right? We hear about survey fatigue. So I'm definitely not suggesting you implement all of these survey methods all at once, but I think, evaluating what problem are we trying to solve? What information are we trying to get from our employees? And then tailoring a survey approach to that, because it is going to make your organization better, especially if we're using that to inform our HR initiatives. A lot of our HR BPs work with clients on these surveys. They'll take the what people want from work survey. They'll do maybe an expanded employee engagement survey as well. And that informs the HR plan that they work with clients to build each year. And then we're able to report out to employees, here's what you said, and here's what we're doing. And by the way, there's some things on the list that like didn't make the cut. It's not that we don't care about them, but we can't necessarily do everything that employees ask for. So important to be clear about that on the front end.
I think a lot of employers get sort of paralyzed in starting surveys because they don't know what tool to use, or if they need a third party, or they just don't know what they don't know. So there's countless technologies out there that you could use. We use SurveyMonkey, there's Pulse Surveys, Typeform. There's a bunch of different platforms to choose from on this, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So don't get overwhelmed by that. Lacey is always a great resource, or I've been heavily involved in surveys, and I could point you to a bunch of different tools, but also just like forming the questions and just what you're trying to get to it probably needs a thinking partner. Mm-hmm. And, but don't let those things stop you from listening to your employees and taking some of these surveys. The annual What People Want from Work survey that we offer for free for everybody, whether you're a client or not a client, that is an easy way to get started for an annual survey. We take care of all the work. You basically just have to send it to your employees. So yeah. So if you have any questions about surveys or tech, we're always here as a resource. All right, let's go to challenge number 6, access to information.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about, you've got your HRIS platform, your Xenium client, we're using Prism. There is loads of information in there, and it can feel overwhelming if you're not used to, being able to get information out of there. I think another challenge that comes with data is just how does it integrate with other platforms? And so having a platform that has an open API like Prism does can be really helpful if you've got different systems that you want your HRIS platform to talk to. Otherwise, what happens is we're entering information in one system and having to duplicate, and then one of those systems inevitably is not going to have the most up-to-date information because it's managed by humans and we're not perfect. And so systems that can talk to each other can be really helpful. Having there be, a process by which getting that information out is easy and straightforward, I think makes a difference. I know, I've had challenges with that in the past. So having a process to pull reports and do that advanced reporting that you might need can be really helpful. So data is, I would say, can be an underutilized tool for an HR person. HR analytics can be intimidating, but there's so much good information that we can find, whether it's inside of your ATS and you're trying to figure out what's the time to fill on average for certain roles. You're looking at your onboarding process. How long does it take folks from starting to finish to get through their onboarding? Or you just want to know like demographical information about your employee groups. Having all of that at your fingertips is really important. We've got some advanced reporting tools now in Prism with Report Center that has been a game changer for a lot of clients. Sometimes we're using that for accounting purposes, right? Like we need a GL that can be easily uploaded into our accounting software. That's one way to use it. I think there's just the employee data for all kinds of things is something to think about. So KPIs and metrics really matter. And I think it's a way for HR to show value too. We talk about that a lot in terms of, what is the ROI for having a team or a person or a vendor like Xenium, a partner that's helping, manage through some of those HR initiatives. I think using the data that's in your system to demonstrate that and look at those numbers around turnover, retention, all that good stuff can be really valuable for a senior leadership team to hear about.
All right, challenge number 7, fragmented documents. We talked about this a little bit when we talked about knowledge management, but this is a little different.
A little bit different. Yeah, I think about, when you've got folks that are just starting out, we're building an employee file for them, right? And back in the day, I can remember going out and we would do file audits for clients and sit in a room and pull the paper files out of the drawer and take them to the conference room and sort through.
Those are
and
good times.
Some of them were inches thick. So a lot of documents that live out there. Security really matters. So to me, my like HR red flags start going off when I think about, okay, it's in a drawer that's not locked, in an office that the door is always open. And we've got personal information in there, and none of us would want just some random person to have access to that. So from a security and confidentiality standpoint, it can be tough to maintain that. There's also risks of like actual company documents, like your handbook, your job descriptions, your forms, your policies, those kinds of things, the right version being available for employees. So if you've saved all of those things on, in folders on some of your drives where employees can go access them, if they're looking at an old version of something and they maybe make a decision based on the information that they're finding, that creates a challenge. And again, it's friction, and that employee experience doesn't feel great. So we talked a little bit about Guru being an option or some type of like knowledge-based system. I also think having that embedded inside of your HRIS is important. So like I said, we want to be able to direct employees to that HRIS platform so that they get used to it. It becomes, something that's sort of a favorite on their web browser because it's a frequented place. If we're having to manually manage sending those documents out, housing them on our drives, I think the version control gets to be tricky. And there are some things where employees need to be able to regularly and easily access information to stay compliant. So, one example that I have that just recently came up, I had a client that we helped support them to do a safety audit. So we partner with Safety Northwest and had their team go out and just do a complimentary walkthrough, kind of like a mock OSHA visit. One of the things that their team had asked one of my client's employees was, can you pull up and locate for me all of the MSDS sheets for the chemicals that are in your department? And that employee was able to do that because all of that information is housed in a place where it's easily accessible. And so if OSHA were to do that and the employee would not have been able to find that, that's a violation. So we want to have information from a compliance standpoint accessible to employees and to managers too. We want to make sure that we're maintaining confidentiality and that, the right people are seeing the right information. That's super important. And just making things easy to access. So, when you're like trying to find something online and it's hard, you're trying to find like a manual for your vacuum and you didn't keep the paper form. Like if there was a way to have that in some type of arsenal that has all your documents, just life would be easier. And I think about that from an employee experience standpoint, that we want them to be able to access what they need so they can get through their work quicker. That's the idea. It's more productivity, taking better care of your customers, which is all positive things for an organization.
All right, challenge number 8, inconsistent performance management processes.
Yeah, I feel like this is like a lot of people deal with this challenge.
Yeah.
Performance management, when you think about like the day-to-day coaching, counseling stuff, that's tough. Then you throw on top of that, well, we're going to do annual reviews, or we're going to do biannual formal performance reviews with employees. And by the way, you're a working manager, so you are actually doing the work too. So find a way to do all of that. That's hard. And what tends to happen is that reviews don't get done on time. Managers avoid giving feedback because it's hard work. So employees are getting inconsistent feedback. I think there can be bias and subjectivity too, especially if you don't have a process. So managers are kind of picking and choosing how they want to do it. Some people get reviewed, some people don't. Some managers have one-on-ones, some managers don't. We also think about like how hard it is when people are not moving towards a common goal. So having things like misaligned, the organization's focused on this thing over here, but employees don't even know about that because there's no way to communicate the organization's goals. That can be tough. And then just again, like from a risk perspective, as an HR person, documentation matters. So Safety Northwest, actually, they said something to me a long time ago, and it's always stuck with me. If it didn't get written down, it didn't happen. So I think that's true. And so how do we create a process and use technology or some type of system to help managers so that they can be efficient in their work? Does matter. So if you have a technology that you're using, and we have explored several of those and have some options for clients that bolt onto Prism, we're able to give more consistent feedback, especially if you implement regular one-on-ones between managers and employees. Like that's actually where the magic happens. I mean, you can have a really good annual review, but performance doesn't generally change after a 30, 45-minute conversation. It's the ongoing consistent feedback that makes a difference. And having a way to record and have a log of that is really helpful. And we know that even employees who are getting predominantly constructive feedback tend to rank themselves more engaged than an employee who's getting no feedback at all. And Gallup does surveys about this all the time. So we know that to be true. And when we have a disengaged employee, the impact to productivity, morale, your employer brand, like all of that goes down. So using a tech that can automate, have less paper, less tracking. Nobody likes to have to send the email to ask the supervisor, did you do your review for Brandon? Brandon, it wants to get his review, and Brandon's manager doesn't want to get that email from HR. So a platform can help with tracking and make sure that we're kind of eliminating the bias and making sure that goals are aligned inside of that. So I love this for organizations. I think there's ways to, kind of piecemeal it together. But if you really want to support a full employee experience through their whole life cycle, a technology like this can make a big difference.
As a manager, the manual aspects of performance management is really challenging. And it often, with not having technology, it doesn't, like, we need to be freed up so we can have these conversations with our people. That's
Yeah.
the most meaningful work that there is. And when you add a technology, it frees you up. So you can have your consistent documentation and a place to put that information, so you can have those conversations, and it makes it way more meaningful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, here's our last challenge: lack of employee self-service.
Yeah. I mean, just think about like our lives. Like we want to be able to do the things ourselves. We don't want to have to, make the phone call, send the email, walk to someone's office so that you can get the thing that solves your problem. So I think a program or a system that you're using where employees can't access information, or it's complicated in terms of how to get to the things that they need, not having it be mobile optimized. A lot of people don't have computers at home because our phone computers here are just so good. So making sure that the tools that you're providing to employees have that mobile access can be really helpful, especially if you're in an environment where you've got employees who don't sit at a desk and work. We work with a lot of employers that have folks who work on the manufacturing floor, and they don't have a desk or a computer set up. So if they want to get a copy of their W-2, that's a challenge. So wanting to, find a way that we're mitigating some of those mobile issues can be tough. So when you're evaluating HRIS platforms and just kind of looking at the tools that you may use, really all of the tools that we've talked about, knowledge-based systems, communication channels, employees being able to have those be user-friendly and self-service is important. So I think about, employees being able to go into the system and make changes to their direct deposit, their address, their tax status. Those things come up all the time, right? Like people get married, they want to add people to their benefit plans. You may want to change your election because you had a baby and you want to increase your FSA contribution. Being able to do all of that easy in a user-friendly platform, I think makes a big difference. And when you've got a self-service tool like the employee portal, you can put some cool things out there. So one of the things that we have out for employees is being able to access member deals. So, we want to keep adding to our benefit stack for employees and just a discount program for all kinds of things. People use it for, ski tickets, movie tickets. I actually explored it when we did a trip to Disneyland and booked through their hotels. So some type of entertainment travel discount inside of an employee portal is cool. Being able to offer the ability for employees to enroll in a pay card if they're not interested in direct deposit, and doing that directly inside of the portal makes a difference. Earned wage access, which is something that's newer for Xenium in the last year or so. So being able to get on-demand wages that I've already earned a portion of those before payday, that eliminates the manual process of advances, right? Like it's having an employee come to you, request the advance, coordinating with payroll. Employees just being able to do that themselves in the portal can make a big difference. I've already said how important it is to have that be mobile accessible because not everyone is sitting at a computer. And so from an equity perspective, we want to, and it's just easier, right? We're on our phones all the time. So I think that just makes sense. And security matters. So even if it is employee self-service, there may be notifications that need to be shared. There may be, if you've got folks changing their address and you need to ensure that your benefit carriers get that change as well, being able to pull those reports in that advanced reporting to get that information in a secure way really matters. So
when it comes to employee self-service or really any of these tech pieces that we've talked about today, like when you consider like the why behind adopting some of these things, I think there's like really two big reasons. One is which as consumers, which all of your employees are consumers, they're using Netflix, Amazon, one-click buying, like there's frictionless tools out there that we're experiencing in our day-to-day lives. So imagine you go to an employer that doesn't have some of these things, they're going to start to apply pressure to you to adopt some of these things. And we're hearing that, we're seeing that. So that's one part. And then as an employer and just people operations, you want to build efficiencies inside your organization, reduce the friction so you can free your people up to do the meaningful work that they're meant to do. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say about adopting tech. I'm also like a complete geek when it comes to this stuff, and I've been on the front lines of product and adding some of these things. So I do have a little bit of bias. I recognize that, but this is the reality. People now have access to things like ChatGPT, and search engines have been powerful for years, and just all of these tools that are readily available, and they also want those things inside the organization.
Absolutely. And I think you're, where you are as an organization, some of these things may be applicable now and some may not. So I think really trying to understand like what are the challenges that you're having, because over implementing technology can be tough too. So really focusing on what are the top issues that your organization is facing. If you're a Xenium client, working with your HR business partner to kind of identify those either through surveys that you've done or what are we hearing from our clients in terms of top challenges. We tried to summarize most of those here today, and then explore solutions. And maybe there isn't budget to do all of them all at once, and maybe that doesn't make sense for your organization. But I would say we're definitely here to help and to talk about how some of these tools may have a positive impact and build out, a timeline to get some of these things accessible for you and for your employees.
Okay, we're at 10:44. We got through the presentation and the content in a pretty good, efficient manner. So we do have some time for Q&A. There are no questions yet, so feel free to use the Q&A. I will pose you a question, Lacey, as I was thinking through your presentation and all of your experience that you've had working with small and medium-sized organizations. If you could think of like one or two of these tools that you've applied, an employer had manual processes, they applied a tech, and it was transformational. What were those top tools?
Yeah, this was many years ago, like when ATS were like first coming out. I had a client that had an affirmative action plan, and that required that they tracked applicants. And in the beginning, I helped implement literally this massive spreadsheet of tracking, and emails back and forth with candidates to get them to fill out the EEO form so that we could put that information into the spreadsheet. And like hours, I would say, they might have 90 recs in a year, like a lot of recruiting and hiring that this company did. When they implemented that ATS, it almost eliminated the need to have this recruiter role, and it put the power in the hands of the supervisors to manage through the hiring process. And I mean, I wish that I knew how many emails would get sent back and forth, but it was a lot. And so that's one that stands out for me. And I think that matters even if you don't have an affirmative action plan. We don't all have those. But that definitely made a difference. The other one that I think about is just ongoing employee surveys and being able to measure changes over time. So I've had clients who we've supported do with annual employee surveys, even before the What People Want from Work survey. And now they're using that as a tool. And it's like a regular thing to go out and present the findings to employees and kind of see what's going well and talk about the initiatives that we set on as an HR team, and then the impact that that's making next year on the score. So I like that. I like looking at the data and seeing how the work we're doing is transforming the workplace. So those two probably stand out the most for me. It's hard to pick. It's all good.
Yeah. I thought of one more question I think is pretty important to touch on, and this is going to vary for organizations, whether you're really small or medium size, but who needs to be at the table for some of these tech conversations? Because I know a lot of resistance comes from we don't have a tech leader, we don't have IT resources, we might have outsourced vendors for that, or we don't have those skill sets inside the organization, so we're just not going to adopt it all together. Like, in your experience in working with small companies, who's usually at the table when making some of these decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say there needs to be inputs from folks that will be users of the technology. Honestly, first to understand what the challenges are that exist so that we can narrow down the tech that we want to put in front of that group. Obviously, whoever is the decision maker, and most of the time that comes to who approves the budget, because there's generally cost associated with some of these things. I like the idea of IT being involved, whether that's even your outsourced partner or an internal person that's responsible for, making sure that technology is implemented well. And if there are, challenges with how that might interact with other technologies that you have. I see some companies, even Xenium does this, where we've got like super users, I think is what we've called it. You are one of those. I have helped a bit with our project management software just because I liked using it. So folks that are inclined towards technology, having a seat at the table as champions for it, because there's change. And when you've got folks who've maybe worked for you for a while or not, people are averse to change, generally speaking. So you definitely need some people, especially after decisions have been made, to help, champion with enthusiasm and excitement and talk about how the product is going to help and is helping. I think all of those people need to be at the table.
All right, that brings us to the end. We'll give everybody 10 minutes back in their schedule today. Have an amazing day. Thank you for being a part of this presentation, Lacey. You're amazing as always. We put our contact information up on the screen, and I'll follow up with an email that will have my email, clearly because it'll be from me, Lacey's contact information. We'll have the slides and recording available for you as well, so you can share it with your team. Feel free. Like all of our content is pretty much on our website for free. And this is one where we just want to provide value. And if you are a Xenium client and you have an HR business partner, make sure to use them as a thinking partner in some of these conversations. And Lacey's always a resource too. So
Absolutely.
have a great day. Thanks for being a part of the presentation.